critical thing about infilling with plaster is you have to know how much you have to mix and how much you have to use. Now, this particular bucket of plaster patching plaster will cover 500 square inches. Now 500 square inches is about 22 inches on a side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure this hole to determine how much plaster I have to mix up. We're going to guess it. This is going to be 3 feet, 5 foot. So we're going to make that 3.5 square feet. So we're going to have to mix up about half of this bucket in order to put the first layer on. This is going to go up in 2 layers. We're going to scratch in between the layers. So let's get on with mixing it. Well, the first thing you want to do is add water, but don't add too much water because this patching plaster really absorbs a lot of water. On this drill here, I'll put a mixer just to make it mix up a little bit quicker. Okay, we're going to need more plaster in there, but this is a good start. A little bit more plaster. And put just a tiny, tiny bit more water in that. The consistency of the mixed up plaster wants to be the consistency of peanut butter. You want it to be loose enough that you can spread it and stiff enough that it'll stay in place. Now the important thing to remember is if it's too loose it'll fall down, and if it's too stiff it'll fall down. So let's start working with what we have here. What I have here is what's called a mud pan. This is generally used in sheetrock work. But for people who don't want to use a hawk, this is a good solution. Put it in the mud pan. The first area we want to plaster, we want to tuck it in around the edges right here like this, to get a real good bond between the old plaster and the new plaster. See how I'm squeezing it right in there? Again, you want to squeeze it in there real tight to get a good bond. Next thing you want to do is fill in the field here. You can see that this plaster layer does not have to be perfect. This plaster layer's purpose is solely to stick onto the lath. What I'm doing now is cutting back along the edge of the old plaster because you want this layer to only be half the depth. The second layer will fill it up the rest of the way. And the added benefit of cutting back is that this plaster that I've taken out In this particular instance, I can use to fill in the rest of the way of this layer. The next thing we want to do is wherever the new patching plaster is on top of the old plaster, we want to scrape that down. If we don't do that, it'll interfere with the next layer. Now, you have to scratch the surface of this plaster so the second layer of plaster has texture to bond onto. This is a tile adhesive notch spreader. It's got 3 different textures and a straight beveled edge for scraping. This is the 3/16, this is the 1/8, this is the 1/4 inch notches. You want to use the 1/4 inch notches. 49 cents local hardware store. You just take it like this. Cross-hatching provides a lot of good texture. And that's it until we put the second layer of plaster on. Hi, it's been 24 hours since we were last here. The adhesive is now set and the scratch coat of plaster is now set. What I'm going to do next is remove the clamps that held the plaster in place while the adhesive set, and I'm going to do the fill coat of plaster. So here we go. Let's take out the clamps. Okay, next thing to do is to mix up the plaster and put in that brown coat. Now we've got the plaster mixed up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to scrape around the edges to make sure there's no pieces of plaster that's going to get the new mix. And it's really light, easy, and there you go, done. So on with the next layer. Now that we've got this up there and roughed in, we don't have to worry about these little chatters and this little ridge and this little lift, because after the plaster sets, what we'll do is we'll just skim those off and cover them with a finish coat and you won't see them. This is fine. What I'm going to do now though is I'm going to take this excess that's on top of the old plaster and just peel that right off. There you have it. Now we wait an hour and a half for this brown coat to set. We'll come by and scrape it off and put the finish coat on. Okay, it's been an hour and a half. It's time the plaster set up and it's time to scrape it down and apply the finish layer. The object is to get all the ridges off it so they don't telegraph through when you put the finished layer on it. We're going to use regular joint knives, and we're going to put this ready mix joint compound on in very thin layers. At the same time, we're going to fill the injection sites too. Call that good enough. After that dries, all I have to do is run over it with a sponge and it's good to paint. I would just use this sponge, moisten it, just have a little bit of water in it, and just wipe it down and it will make it smooth, good enough to paint, no sanding involved.